to put all the pieces together. But really love it. I feel like seriously on a good path here.
That's cool. Yeah, it is one of those concepts that's easy to grasp for just about anybody. I don't have a scientific background. Most of us don't have Ph.D.s or scientific backgrounds, but yet we're able to absorb this information and understand it in some cases more clearly than physicists in the standard model. So it's a very simplified theory and very interesting. I haven't met anybody that was turned off by it or said this is complete nonsense and I don't want anything to do with it. It sparked a lot of interest, no doubt. So you have a pretty strong presence on Facebook, is that right? And YouTube too? Do you have a handle on YouTube that you go by?
No, I think I forget which YouTube. I've gone through so many different iterations, but I don't know which one I'm looking at. And I think I'm still logged into my old one, which was my old email. But no, I'm pretty much mostly on Facebook, and that's where, and Twitter and Facebook. Yeah.
You watch the So News every morning?
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, I've become a member of them. I also gave to the Thunderbolts campaign this year, so just kind of really also appreciating it with a little bit of financial support too. Not a lot, but a little bit, just to kind of help add in.
That's awesome. Hey Joel, you want to give us a quick background on your online presence?
Yeah, so I've just been involved in like alternative physics stuff for like the last 20 years or so, and so yeah, about probably like 15 years ago, I guess if it's that old, got in contact with the Electric Universe group, or just absorbing all that material.
So you've been around for a while. You've seen them start up. I would imagine. Yeah, a quick influx of subscribers, and Facebook channels just taking off too. It's amazing to watch the growth of it.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Yeah, so I started out in like philosophy and applied that to like extending some source theory. So Lebow's source theory. So just have
I love source theory. Tell us a little bit more about source theories.
So Gerald Lebau originated that model, but it's based on like superfluid ether. So and the key component of that is that it's compressible. That it can compress into cymatically, equilibrated and quantized matter units or atoms or whatever. So it's just it just basically brings everything down to causality, which is the key of it. So that you can experience force, because you can touch. You just bring it down to touch, so that everybody is directly in contact with force and is not abstract.
That's a good subject to start with. Do you have any ideas on this, Kongpop, you'd like to share?
So yeah, talking about my story. I can tell.
We were talking a little bit about the source theory and the ether.
Oh yes.
I'd like to have a discussion on the ether.
To be honest, when I first study about everything that's going on, I never get the concept of ether, and people always explain something, and all I can visualize is something just like Joe has described. So something we can deduct from what we can hear, touch, smell, and taste, and feel, and of course it has to make sense. And the way it seemed like the standard concept of vacuum is empty space is just there has to be something more to it, for it, because it seems like nothing seems to die down. I mean, something keeps regenerating and replenishing in this universe, so there must be something that drives it. So ether, it's a great concept, and has been adopted by so many scientists. I mean, the past, before modern days science, and they all made great things, like Nikola Tesla and other people. So they always refer to this ether as a ultimate medium in the universe.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the fascinating things that I've discovered in my research with the ether, was a theory that Walt Thornhill had that he learned in his early days in college from one of his associates that was describing the neutrino as a possible catalyst for all life that may be found within the neutrino itself, and that the neutrino is not just coming from the stars, but it pervades the entire universe, the galaxy, and all things, and may be the constituting factor for the ether itself. But I found that a fascinating theory that Walt put forward. I did do a video on my channel about that, and with his speech on that subject. And it seems very plausible that within the neutrino could carry all the information or the building blocks of life, so that when conditions are apt, life will spring forth on its own.
I'd like to add something to that, Trevor. Neutrino is known to terraform DNA, but there's also something in the neutrino that reconstructs it in that natural form that it should be. It repairs as well.
Oh, that's interesting. I know it has an influence on us, and it passes through solid material because it has no charge, and its mass is so small that it acts as a neutral, material, whatever you want to call it. And the way Wall described it is that it can have a shift where the dipoles on it will become polarized, a negative and a positive, that allows for that instant transfer of energy through those dipoles connecting and aligning, causing a conduit or a channel for that current to carry.
Oh, I like that idea myself, actually. Yeah, I think that magnetism is more like, the particle y'all talking about there.
Yeah, the neutrino.
Yeah, the neutrino is more like magnetism, in my opinion.
Yeah, the interesting thing about it, though, it doesn't have a charge. It's neutral. But at some point, it takes on a charge, and maybe that's the base building block of matter. It starts within that neutrino.
Then a lot of people think about, what the source of ether is, It's hard, in my opinion, to say. I was of the firm belief that it may have been electricity or some sort of plasma for a long time until just recently. And now I have a different opinion, and I love the way that changes over time. It happens over and over.
Yeah, and constant learning process.
It does appear now, and especially with the work that I've caught on with Kongpop's work there, it does appear now that vibration alone can be responsible for the etheric force.
Oh yes, I think it's probably part of the ether. I don't know. I don't know how to call it that time, so I just call it quantum fluctuations. So,
what's so eerie?
All could be the same thing.
What's so eerie about it the past few months here, the work we've been working on, and confronting Ben, talking with Ben about it, and a few other people, is the fact that this source could actually be, it literally could be the voice. And especially when you look in terms of fractals, in an endless amount of fractals, it could very well be that some sort of sound or vibration that carries it on and on and on.
Like a repeating vibration.
It appears to me, that electricity being the carrier of these vibrations, and electricity will carry a vibration identically to the way that you hear it, the sound identically to the way that you speak it. I mean, looking into what we've been doing for 100 years now, with the microphone and the speaker. the simple setup of communication. And the way it's so simple to integrate a voice into an electric charge. And we think, well, I have all my life actually thought that electronics is what has done that. In reality, it's not done anything. If you look at what the oldest type microphone is, the ribbon motor, and you study how that ribbon motor works, it does it all by itself. Electricity integrates sound waves all by itself. We literally don't do anything. In fact, every conductor that moves inside a magnetic field creates a pulse of electricity in the conductor. That's the basis of it to begin with. And so, when you look at it in those terms, every piece of metallic or wood or anything that vibrates in this room that I'm talking in is vibrating at the frequency of my voice, and it's producing an electric current. And be it ever so small a current, that doesn't take away anything, being the fact that it's still there. So every conductor in this room is in a magnetic field. So if you vibrate that conductor, it will create an electric charge. And a simple voice will vibrate a conductor. And all conductors on Earth are in the Earth's magnetic field. So therefore, sound would induce current in everything around me. See? Yeah, that's where it really gets interesting, because, I start that source by, or taking a hammer and hit this table. That sound will vibrate everything in this room and create electric charge in it. And that's the actual basic principle of the ribbon motor, the microphone itself. It's very, very simple.
Yeah, it makes me think of the plasma speaker too, that electric arc generates the sound as well.
That's a lot more complex, and it's at the other end of the scale, the end of the distribution of sound, where we reproduce it rather than trying to integrate it into an electric charge with the microphone. We release that electric charge out through a speaker, or in the case of the plasma speaker, high voltage just released into the atmosphere. Again, we don't do anything. This does this all by itself.
Yeah, I'll post that video underneath this one too that has a demonstration showing that.
Yeah, I'm in the process of making a video right now on this sound electricity integration to the best of our ability. We can sit here and say that we know how it works, because we don't. It definitely, even in our geological experiments that we've been doing, there towards the end, I added some vibration, just standard offset counterweight, rotating counterweight, and verified that, the frequency by monitoring the RPM and the little motors that I was using, and we can create literally all the mountain ranges on the surface of this planet right there with just vibration, no electricity whatsoever.
I've got a rhetorical question regarding ether when y'all give
time's
right. Okay, this is kind of for Billy and for Dr. Kongpop. So we've established that electricity and vibrational energy are integrally linked, but as regards the ether, without an atmosphere or a solid conductor, that's a solid material, do we suspect that the ether is the medium by which that same interaction takes place, what we consider empty space, which we know, of course, is not empty because it's filled with energy. But that's my question for Billy and for Kongpop: is ether the kind of the default medium that accomplishes that integration of electricity and sound and vibration?
Billy, you want to go first?
I'd rather you go first, but that's
okay.
I would.
All right. So my opinion, if we call ether is part of this everything. It's the feeling of the mediums, or we can call that vacuum. is actually everywhere, even inside solid or liquid or gas, because every atom contains vacuum surrounding the nucleus, right? And you just consider one atom alone, the surrounding is vacuum. So same thing of liquid and gas. So we can say that ether actually penetrates through everything, not just space, but everything. And of course, if we can propagate, if the wave propagates just like sound and relies on liquids, propagate the same way, contains both longitude and transverse wave. Same thing for gas and plasma. So we can say that ultimately there's a common medium among all 4 different types of matters, state of matters in this universe. So of course it has a superset of everything, supposed to have the same properties of wave. And I mean, that's my take on it. So if sound wave exists in all mediums, or time longitude wave should exist in the most fundamental thing, which is the medium itself, which is ether. So what do you think, Billy?
I agree. I agree with that. I think motion is the way of extracting that.
Yeah.
Motion is going to be integrated in there in some form or fashion. The conductor itself has to be in motion in order to induce current. Fundamentally, when we look at electrical engineering, that's what has to happen. And not necessarily saying that motion is the ether, but motion is what extracts from it, in my opinion.
Oh yes. Another thing I would like to add is the way that Michelson, let's call Michelson experiment, that try to falsify ether. Of course, that one he assumed is just a directional thing, just going through the Earth, and from the experiments that like semantic experiment, you can see that the vibration actually go in the radio direction, along the optical path. So some of the experiment that Michelson has done is of course is incomplete, and of course so the conclusion that they come up with is is not complete, and somehow that how the mainstream science takes from there, right? Just using that conclusion and try to come up with a new theory. And of course, in the end, it seems like they probably have to come back to this, just using different names to describe the same thing. So, I don't know, from my opinion, this looks like they're working with neutrino and other forms, right? They try to find the finest particles and things like that.
One last piece to that question is, in your opinion, Dr. Kongpop, is the ether a compressible medium that would, for example, explain possibly how in celestial orbital mechanics that balance is always quickly established with any object in that system that's not, that's moving. In other words, is the ether involved in orbital mechanics, and could it explain potentially how quickly, for example, the planet Venus, as some of us believe was, as a recent addition to the solar system and started its journey out from where Jupiter is. Could the ether have been the what's the word? The dampening, compressible dampening medium that allowed for Venus to very quickly circularize its orbit.
I'm quite certain that it's a compressible medium. One of the main evidence is very fundamental. Is in the one atoms, like hydrogen atoms, and of course we have bands of electrons, and of course there are certain number of electrons that can exist in the band, right, for different bands. And of course the lowest one is 2, and then there's 8, and so forth. And of course there has to be a way that controls number existing matters in that orbital bands. If the medium cannot be compressed, then there's no restriction or anything that actually forcing a number of electrons to form in some certain band or in an orbit of solar system. And I cannot visualize anything that is not moving. It's like the law of nature that everything is in a state of changing. You cannot have a total static medium that doesn't interact with the surrounding. It seems unnatural to me. So
yeah, well, that's a good point too. I mean, even when you're thinking you're sitting perfectly still, you're moving in one direction, and the Earth is rotating in one direction and moving around the sun, and the sun's moving in a direction. I mean, we're always in a constant state of momentum and movement.
Yes, it's always in a state of change, and you can't even define something that is remain completely static and doesn't move at all in this universe. It just doesn't seem natural. So of course, either has to be compressible or expandable, right?
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thanks, appreciate it. Yeah, appreciate the answer.
When you talk about motion, man, that gets deep.
Yeah.
Well, when you sit here and think about the motion, you're 1,000 miles an hour on the surface of the planet as it rotates. It's 60,000 miles per hour as it orbits the sun. The sun moves through the galaxy at some, I had to start looking this up now. I can't remember. I want to say like 400,000 miles per hour, somewhere in that nature. And then the galaxy itself is moving headlong through space at another astronomical rate that's even higher. So there's nothing we know of that's not in motion. And there's really nothing that we know of that's not immersed in a magnetic field. So, I mean, to look for source, there you go. There's a perfect candidate for source. It's the fact that we are moving in a magnetic field. That's the physics of electricity, is a conductor in motion in a magnetic field. That induces electricity into everything we know from what we think may be the ether. Hey, that's a great point. Yep. It's incredible when you really look at it. Everything is moving.
A good point Doctor made too was on the fact that this, like the neutrino, it pervades all material. I mean, it can pass through any object. So ether, if that's what it is neutrino or these micro, pieces of matter. I mean, the mass is so small with the neutrino, it's barely detectable. It makes it virtually impossible to detect these neutrinos. But maybe it's the vibration that you're setting them at a certain vibration and they resonate, and then that power becomes available for use. I don't know. I think so. I really do. Where that vibration comes from, I have no idea. It is incredible to pay attention to, though. I mean, you can almost sit and say that all matter gets energy from the point in which it rotates, meaning that all the atoms on this planet rotate around a central point from which it gains its energy. All the planets in the solar system rotate around a central point from where they get their energy. All these stars rotate around a central point from which they get their energy, the center of the galaxy.
And now we recently found that, the great attractor, now we have hundreds of thousands, got a giant fractal over and over.
Yeah, that's a good point. It brings us into, the next question here with the ether. Is that the concept for the Tesla generator? I mean, is it possible to actually pull energy from the etheric field and utilize it?
I think we do that every day. I think the AC generator is doing that very thing as we speak. I do think that's exactly where it's coming from. It's definitely not bound up in the atom. The free electrons flow through material.
Well, there's definitely an induction that takes place around magnetic fields. We know that the power lines induce current from the atmosphere. But my main, question here, is it possible to create a device that runs entirely on drawing energy from the...
Well, there's a question there to answer about motion.
I'd like to add something. Sure. I read some documents that were using fractal rectangular arrays with a Koch curve configuration and some special capacitors in order to collect that ambient energy. And in fact, there was some indication that DARPA has already developed the technology and is in use as we speak. So, that's kind of just an innuendo at this point in time because nobody's produced an operational device. But if that's the case, then you wouldn't need any battery banks essentially if you could produce enough power to run a small household on that ambient. I'm not sure what efficiencies, but it seems to be a technology that's being developed.
Yeah, I would like to add to that a little bit. For me, the simplest self-sustaining electrical device is charge. The charge by itself, like a positive charge. I mean, the way that if you understand how it can maintain its charge, how it interact with its environments to maintain the charge and producing electric field, that pointing out towards or inwards the matters, then of course we can actually produce a very similar device that actually runs by itself. And of course, the charge cannot create it or destroy it. It has to have some kind of something that supplies it. So, and I believe the way charge work is actually something that actually gathers energy from its surroundings and radiate it back in the form of electricity. So, and I believe there's some device like that. People are very smart to design some device that actually have very similar property. What's it called? There's one electrostatic generator, Tetus. I don't remember the name. And there's some other people who have done a lot of research about this in the field. However, from my experience and the way I study this energy is not easily be tapped unless we know the right resonance frequency that material or something that actually vibrate at is its own natural frequency. So we have to actually know the right frequency of that the thing we try to tap to. Then we can actually pull the energy from it.
So in concept, I mean, the energy's there in the ether. For example, like the pyramids utilize an ion flow, a negative ion flow over like an aquifer. I believe Tesla's Warden Cliff was set up with the same configuration. There was an aquifer underneath the tower, and they were drawing current through coils that were 30 plus feet underground, I believe, as well as the coil that extended up into the air for the two units. So I would imagine, the process for any of these generators would have to be similar to literally tapping into the Earth's flow. And if that's the case, and determining the resonant frequency of that flow, it doesn't seem like it would be all that complicated to go through the frequencies and figure out which frequency it is. I know, with the work that Rife has done, it's utilized a lot of different frequencies to transmute bacteria and stuff.
I'd like to add one more thing to that. There's already been a court case trying to resolve whether a microwave frequency being attenuated and harvested that were being produced by the telecom industry was infringing on their transmission by absorbing that energy. And in fact, I think it was ruled in the telecom industry's favor that it was their source power, and that any attenuation or harvesting of that energy would be infringement on their property. It's a concern. Men may be able to add more to that and have an attorney background.
It's the same with high voltage power lines.
Sure.
You can't harvest them if they go over your property. You can't harvest that effect.
Precisely.
Right, yeah, technically that would be, theft of power, but this type of system wouldn't be using an induction in that method at all. I mean, you would be looking at a whole different scale, a scalar wave level. Those frequencies interfere with ham radio operations and stuff.
Yes, that's the point. I think that's going to be a key point. Who owns the electromagnetic spectrum?
Well, FCC owns the whole channel. I mean, they own all the channels.
Yes.
Telecommunications lease bands for those channels, and some channels are reserved for government communications, aeronautics, etc. But once you utilize a system like this that goes across all bands, all channels, and interferes with all those frequencies.
I'm back in.
There's
Hello.
David. Hey, sorry about that. We're having some issues going on. David.
Now,
Yep. Just Joel. We're good to go.
10 people. Awesome.
All right. So should we switch subjects now?
Might as well.
I'm getting tired of that. It happens every time we seem to get off on the subject of ether. And have a lot more call quality issues.
I bet if we talk about man-made climate change, we'll have an open line that won't bother us a bit.
Yeah. Right on. Maybe we should talk about that. That's good stuff.
All right, I'd like to talk about that, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Let's talk about man-made climate change and the disregard for the contribution of electromagnetic spectrum and radiation that mankind creates. It's not even a concern or consideration, yet it has to be a factor.
Yeah. I've asked that question myself.
Electromagnetic pollution.
Absolutely. It doesn't matter if it's direct, in my opinion, or otherwise. It all has to have a contribution.
We convert, how much of a percentage of the electricity we use do we convert into heat?
Yes.
And not a single climate scientist says a single word about that.
Not a word. That's the unspoken word.
70 to 80% of it, in my opinion. I don't know. I'd have to look it up. It'd be more than 50% of the electricity you use, you convert into heat. With your air conditioner and your stove and your dishwasher,
Absolutely.
water heaters.
And with the potential of inducing that current into the Bergman filament and creating the same effect on the sun, on the other planets.
Yeah, and you also have to think along the lines about what that electricity was intended to do before you did that to it. I mean, what effect was it supposed to have on the core of this earth before you turned it into heat?
Good point, Billy.
Because our whole grid system's based on, ground. It's all earth grounded. The end of the run is earth. Whether it be any generator, solar generator, no matter what we use. Wind.
Yeah, that's a
positive charge and send it to ground, and we turn it in mostly into heat.
That's a good point, Billy, because a lot of people don't realize when they start looking at, like Tesla's technology, what he was trying to do at Wardenclyffe. A lot of people are under the assumption that he was creating a broadcast system to send this wireless power out over the air, over airways, and utilize it that way. But that wasn't how the system was designed at all. It was actually designed to pull current in from the atmosphere and send it out through ground. And by sending it out through ground, it made it able to travel throughout the crust of the Earth with very little attenuation, very little loss of power. It was a very efficient way of transferring it through the scalar waves, and you can utilize all the bands and utilize it for communication as well as power transfer through ground rods.
That's good theory and everything, and it does work. There's no doubt about it. But the long-term effects, too, in my opinion, we don't know because we didn't go that route. And in my opinion, I don't know that it would have an effect, but it would more than likely affect the way plants grow and everything else. And studies need to be done to make sure that that doesn't do the wrong thing to the.
I agree. He was talking about tuning the Schumann resonance value, and those things, would change the global atmosphere as well. It's possible that it could have caused a lot of changes, and whether those changes are good or bad, we don't know. We went with another system, the RCA research that they did in San Diego to determine which one of these two systems would be more efficient or usable or acceptable, whatever. They decided to go with the microwave-based Hertz model and use this system to create a lot of electricity here and send it out like a sprinkler, spraying this power, these microwaves out. That's very inefficient. It's a waste of power the way it's being distributed now. I think we would have been a lot better off if we had went with the other system. Granted, we're using high frequency still. There's still an application there that could potentially cause human health issues, but we just don't know. There's just not enough research on this human health effect of these radiomagnetic waves. Is it all spectrums that do this, or is it just certain spectrums that are causing us health issues?
I'd like to interject that Tesla was a confirmed eugenicist. He held in the circles of eugenicists. He wrote articles and spoke about this topic. I calculated that essentially he figured this was a mechanism by which to control growth populations.
I think something else too, man. A lot of people don't realize about this entire industrial age that we came up in. Using fossil fuel. The more you look into fossil fuel in the production of oil and gas, and you realize that this is a product of heat and pressure or an induction. The fact is, if this whole cycle, this cataclysmic type cycle, is based on that type of heat and pressure, which we know firmly well electricity will create this heat and pressure. The fact that we spent the last 100 years drilling several million holes in the planet, relieving it of all this pressure, we still have no idea geologically what we may have averted already in terms of cataclysm. Nobody's ever even looked into that aspect of it. And there's, if you can believe in climate change, that when you start looking at the numbers, as far as how many wells have been drilled and how much relief has been taken, you have to know that we've actually made a big difference in the internal heat and pressure of this crust of this earth in the past 100 years of draining all this fuel out of it.
Yeah,
we learned a little bit about that, Billy, from what happened down there with the BP oil disaster out in the Gulf of Mexico about 8 years ago.
Well, all the work that's been done the past 4 or 5 years in the oil industry showing these oil wells filling back up.
That's a good point. There was a study done down there in Texas after the Gulf oil rig explosion, and all these wells that were dry in Texas now are full of oil again. So you have to ask yourself, was this a move on man's behalf to shift something underground, or is this a pressure release to prevent that tar volcano in the Gulf from exploding, or is there financial revenue behind this, lucrative revenue to be gained by somebody by doing this? I mean, there's a lot of questions behind that oil spill.
I followed it extensively as it was happening. There was a maritime website that you could track all these vessels, and you couldn't track any military, but you could track any other vessel. And at any given time throughout those months, I live right here by the Gulf. Any given time you could check that website, there were at least 1,000 oil tankers in that area, all throughout that area. And not to mention the fact that, didn't get put in the news a lot, but there were several, more than a dozen methane releases from methane wellheads that popped off throughout that Delta region of Louisiana during that same time. And then, of course, we have the, what was that guy's name? What was his name? Mark, do you remember the guy's name that talked about the 20-foot wide hole? They're all paying attention to the 6-inch pipe, but they're not paying any attention to the 20-foot wide.
I remember the fellow you're talking about, but it's been too long ago.
Matt Simpson.
Simpson. Yeah, Matt Simpson. That's him.
Suddenly mysteriously died of a heart attack after making that statement. Hey, he's a well-known.
Well, while we're on the subject, I hate to risk the call being interrupted again by, nefarious types, but what about the origin of these carbon deposits? Does anybody want to venture down that road? Like, y'all think that all this is fossil fuel?
Well, I think all these bodies are producing this life. I mean, they produce life. And just like Earth does, Venus did too. In my opinion, to see rivers of oil coming from the sky, and that did come from Venus, it lost an immense amount of life at that point. Because it's very simple. I can go out here in my backyard, pull up some green foliage. I can burn it and create oil right here in my yard. In fact, anybody who smokes a cigarette creates oil in that filter there. I mean, it's a very simple process. You can use low heat and high pressure. That's one way of doing it. But high heat at normal pressure will create the same crude oil. There are people all over YouTube making their own oil and gas to run their vehicles from wood-burning stoves. Very simple.
A renewable fossil fuel.
We have to not only, if we do find layers of oil that may have come from another planet, we still have to have, something to show for the layer of crust that we have, during this cataclysmic change, because whole forests would turn into massive amounts of oil, would seep down through the ground. And to see it come from Venus like that just tells me it had massive forests. It had life. It was full of life. And I think in some of the Thunderbolt's accounts, Venus wasn't Venus a sister to Earth at one time, considered?
I know some.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of history to Venus. And if I can take your minds down a different path here, I mean, think about it. Well, the Greeks called Venus Athena, which was the daughter of Jupiter. So if Venus was a moon, let's say, of Jupiter, and during a different period of time Jupiter was closer into the sun, it would make Venus, a habitable planet, possibly. So this scenario is not far-fetched by any means. I know according to like Velikovsky and the Thunderbolts, they believe that Venus was expelled as a comet from Jupiter or Saturn. But it may very well likely be that it was birthed at one time, as moons are birthed from planets, but had an extended period of time where life was allowed to develop, being in closer to the sun during that capture model of Saturn and Earth. It could cause the havoc to kick Jupiter out. There could be a battle between Saturn and Jupiter there, as the ancients described these as their gods, and they went to war. Maybe that's exactly what took place. And during that exchange, Venus set in turmoil and flipped over and set fire to the planet. turned it into a comet until it reached its current orbit.
I have to bring up the latest news from 67P too, the discovery of all those organic compounds there. Philae, the little lander that came out of Rosetta, actually picked up organic material 6 miles above its surface, according to the German scientists there that put those instruments on that. And it also picked up organic life on its initial touchdown, as well as its permanent landing place. Yeah. 16 new compounds, or 16 compounds were seen. Several they already knew of, and some new ones they hadn't seen before. So,
yeah, the standard model has no good explanation for this, why these molecules are showing up. But here in the electric universe theory, we expect that. We predicted that to happen because of the chondrite, because of how these are formed. We believe that the electric discharge destroys these planets, and the fragments that are remaining are the fragments of those planets, so they should contain organic materials.
I think they said there was no amino acid there, so I mean, the building blocks for life are there, sitting right there.
Yeah.
On the latest comment. And you all see that, it's just a big rock.
Yeah, but life in general tends to, be found all around the Earth, even in the upper atmosphere, and that's where the ISS resides, and even further out onto some satellites, there's been biological growth taking place. So to say that, it's inhabitable space, maybe some parts are, maybe we're just still within the magnetic field to protect that life, to allow it to exist at those altitudes. But when you start seeing on cometary bodies that there's, the building blocks of life, it really questions, are they carrying life? Are there micro biology that's taking place on that even now?
Absolutely. There was a funny part that tickled me when I read one part about, the water. They described the water on Comet 67P not being the same makeup as the water on Earth. So therefore they ruled that, water from Earth may very well not have come from comets. So it must have come from asteroids. And it just tickles me that they overlook the process that's happening on that comet now that's producing the water around it. This continuous gas atmosphere is mostly water. And this rock is emitting a massive amount of oxygen.
Right. They're missing the forest because it can't see through the trees.
Comets tend to have heavy water, similar to what we find in the reactors. Water is created in the atmosphere.
Yeah.
Billy, you speak about the organic compounds abundant in the universe everywhere they go, and the fact is it's pretty well studied phenomena that astrophysical masers do emit these complex carbon molecules. So I'm just suggesting that it's impossible that the basic building blocks of all matter, of all organic life, is abundant in the universe, and wherever it forms is wherever the frequency allows it to form. Mm-hmm. In that model.
Last year, the ISS had reports where they found actual living organisms on the outside of the space station.
Absolutely.
This was in the news.
Yeah, hydrogen is detected at 183 megahertz, I want to say. And that's what they use to detect hydrogen molecules. So when they see these masers at 183, they know it's hydrogen, and they know it's stars that are emitting these massive masers of water, pretty much. I mean, water doesn't exist in space, turns to gas, but I mean, it's hydrogen that's being detected there.
Absolutely. And the very narrow spectral line frequencies that they occur in the universe are noticed in these maser outflows, and sometimes there might be 3 resonant frequencies for that maser outflow, but all of them are very identifiable by that method.
Yeah, definitely. They use that same method on our star, and they detected water, spouting out of these sunspots at the 183 hertz. So I looked into this a little bit when we did our research on star water, and there was a lot of classified information with that frequency, because at 183 hertz you're aligning hydrogen molecules, and this is how a basic, plasma accelerator works, is by accelerating hydrogen. So there's a lot of classified information on that, and I found that Haynes Alpha did a lot of work with that as well. And it's interesting, though, that we can detect this water, and it's so abundant throughout. There's entire clouds of this gas within warm regions of a star where it could even be in liquid form if there's enough of a field around it, I guess, where it's not a vacuum. I don't understand it, but clearly they're detecting these huge clouds of different alcohols and different gases that are floating around. Supposedly we're going to pass through one here in the next some thousands of years. Just wonder what kind of effect that would have. I know we passed through these clouds before, and we passed through meteor tails, the different debris that floats around out there, but the way the sun expels material like water and gold and different elements, I would think at some point they'd have to be concentrated and rained down on the Earth, some kind of capture. And we've seen that up in the northern regions. There's a lot of platinum that's rained down. There's different layers, and we can see these different events. And it makes me wonder if this is something that's coming from a star that's expelled, or if this is just one of these maser-type clouds that was formed and our solar system passes through it, and then we get a showering of gold or platinum or whatever material.
Yeah, I wonder, Trevor, whether that material, when it is emitted from these astrophysical lasers, where does it attenuate? Would it attenuate in a resonant frequency of a sympathetic pattern? Would it be a cymatic effect? Would it have a correlation to the harmonics that create the belts and the orbital patterns, and therefore the density and the accumulation of these different materials at specific orbital patterns?
Yeah, I mean, everything has its flow, so to speak. It's going to, like the Chladni plate, it's going to fall into its pattern, whatever frequency it's vibrating at, which makes me think a lot about Markland convection and the way these currents are carrying the connection between, let's say, the Andromeda at the Milky Way is attached through some kind of an umbilical cord to the Andromeda. There's some kind of transfer that's going through these connection points, and it makes me think that there is a certain resonant frequency there that's controlling the oscillations and what we're vibrating at. From that source.
Don't you think it could be layers of vibrations?
Oh yeah.
And all sorts of energy levels that are coming together. Maybe some of them create a focal point that draws in on itself, acting like kind of like Nassim's toroids, that center point compressing electrons to a point of matter.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's like both Kongpop's cadmium plate experiments. They're a good example of that. And if you look into Markland convection, there's an element process where elements tend to they say convert. I don't know where they actually come from, but I mean you find.
Yeah.
Look up Markland, L-U-N-D convection, and this is there's a Wikipedia page or some type of wiki page there that was made up by Wall. Am I correct, Mark?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, Markland convection or Markland convection, and it's the process of centrifugal force of spinning these heavier elements and allowing some kind of cohesion to take place and actually bring this matter into existence within that Markland current. Or I believe the stars are utilizing this Markland convection in every spicule.
All of them are. I think everything is, including you and I. If you really think about bone marrow, you think about blood, you think about what blood is actually based on.
Yeah, it's like we discussed last week, the Lorentz force. It's giving a spiraling force of momentum, almost.
It's like a planet. All planets, all objects should have iron at their core, according to Markland convection. I think they do. I really do. But it's not at a molten hot temperature. Well, along with wall, I go with wall on that one, honestly.
As I understand it, what determines the order of these elements being drawn into the center of the Markland convection is its ionization potential, Billy, and so I think the easier it can be ionized, the easier it is for that force, if you will, to bring it into the center and keep it there, even over a period of time.
I agree. I think it's the basis of all.
Yeah.
That's the electric force doing that work. That's right.
Definitely.
That's the electric force keeping it.
Yeah, between the ionizing level of whatever material that is and the fields around it, the double layers, creating that encapsulating effect to allow that centrifugal force to take place. It's definitely momentum. It's definitely movement. I just see them as twisted pairs spinning when I try to visualize a Birkeland current or a Markland convection. It looks really similar to a Birkeland current, the way they diagram it. And it's the same momentum I visualize the solar system moving through the galactic equator here up and down. It's a spiraling motion. It's like a corkscrew type motion. Yeah, it seems to play a lot with vibration and the same concepts that we try to use to explain.
Yes. So, according to my understanding, is the basic philosophy in the Eastern world is about everything is is subject to change. It's in the state of moving all the time, as well as it's just something that comes and goes, just vanishing and disappearing, appearing and disappearing. So the vibration is a phenomenon where all those things that actually vibrate. So something comes and goes, but it's have been keeping repeating certain patterns with some certain frequencies and cycles. So it forms a state of mind on its own, and of course it becomes materialized. If you keep reinforcing something over and over and over again, something becomes materialized from something in the interior state. So I don't know if that's related, but that's how I see it. So it's just like the cymatic experiments where we start with something that's actually uniform, assuming it's a medium material, and then we have some reinforcement of some certain vibration. We start to see matter start to condense around the center point. So it's something can materialize because of the vibration.
Yeah. And I also like the take on energy, electric bodies, how, humans have magnetic fields associated with them and that we're connected to the earth through this electrical connection, through meditation, through focusing our own energy.
Oh, yes. That is a very advanced science, I guess. When I was taught about all this meditation, I never think about in terms of magnetism. It's about how the minds kind of get attracted to some certain types of things, some material things, like the way gravity works, something that pulls the other things toward it, and of course there has to be some certain kind of force, and you can look at that as electrical force, something to do with magnetic field, electric field. So yeah, we can visualize like that. But I don't know, in terms of spirituality, the concept of how the body and mind interacts, it's probably something close to that, and how the mind interface outward beyond the body is probably something related to electric as well, which I don't quite know. So
Yeah. Well, I know I've done some experiments around the house where I would walk around with a voltometer and try to determine how much voltage my body was picking up at certain spots in the house. And I would notice, walking by like the microwave or different stuff, I would spike a little bit in voltage, or a bad power outlet or a bad switch would have a magnetic field around that was inducing current right into my body. And, my research indicated that this was causing inflammation, and that I could actually reduce inflammation just by grounding properly. So I went through the process of grounding my bed with silver sheets and a ground rod, and noticed, checking with the voltometer that, I go to zero when I'm on ground. And I get a great sleep that way now. I sleep consistently, and I think it really helps with a lot of my inflammation and stuff, and kind of proves to me that, we are electric beings, and this interactions that we have with our environment do affect our health, and there's certain things that are just out of our control that tend to trigger a lot of things in us, whether it's a form of evolution and we're evolving as humans through this influence. I'm not sure, but it definitely has an effect on us. I feel that it changes us when we're exposed to a lot of this electromagnetic pollution. It puts us in a state of being inflamed and of a bad state of mind, so to speak.
Oh yes, it's our mind is highly susceptible to external environment. I've been doing a lot of space weather podcasts and other things, and I notice a lot of time, not even have to be space weather, something about full moon.
Yeah.
How people can behave strangely or more violent.
Yeah.
During those times. Of course, it's a lot of. There could be something beyond electric, which I don't know, but definitely something.
Yeah, I would definitely vouch for that. I can vouch for that firsthand, and I've had that experience quite a bit. Last night we had a blue moon, and I was, I could not calm my mind. I'm getting upset again. And, I ended up writing an email that I shouldn't have wrote, and here comes the cops knocking on my door again. So it's these little triggers that I have, and I don't understand them all the time. But there's things that just set me off that I tend to lose, reasoning for a moment there, and my mind kind of goes a little off subject. I try to focus and stay focused on, the things that I need to let those things pass from my mind. But it seems that these events, when they happen, are almost out of my control, or I have a really difficult time, controlling myself.
Yes, it's beyond control many times. Just like our body, when it gets sick, can't control it. So there are other approach to actually be able to be free from such influence. So that would be through meditation, and I think that's one of the very important things that everyone should do, because we are susceptible to so much information, and also electronics, electromagnetic interference, all kinds of things, and it could sometimes drive people crazy.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, without a doubt. What's interesting, we've done a lot of research into that, the human health connection, and David Hyde, one of our researchers that used to run the Observers project over there on Facebook. Well, he did a lot of research on it, the Schumann resonance, and actually had scientific papers that were written, and people were experiencing these episodes of depression and anger and outrage that were in northern latitudes of places like Siberia, all the way across to Alaska. And they seemed to have a higher admittance rate of suicidal tendencies during these periods of time where we were inducing current and the auroras were lighting up. And then went even further into research, found out about this thing called mundane fire, which the Aborigines had well documented, where their tribal chiefs would see these auroras and they would start sleeping with the other tribal chiefs' wives, and murder would ensue, and they would just go to war. They were literally losing their minds when these auroras took place. And it concerns me that there may be a large flare that takes place to generate enough inductance to where the auroras go all the way to the equatorial regions. And, really, what kind of effect is that going to have on the human population as unstable as it is now,
Well, you kind of only have to look to 1859 for some idea of some of the effects, geophysical effects of such an event. The Carrington event of 1859.
I still believe that was probably a pretty small event compared to what our star is capable. I don't know if those wind speeds ever reached over 2,000 kilometers when they were hitting the Earth. I think it was a pretty mild storm compared to what it could be.
Yeah, but the auroras did reach all the way down, I think, into the, if not down to all the way to the equator, to about latitude 10 or 15.
Is it really?
Yeah, for about 2 days.
I can remember the solar storm of '79. I was 12 years old or somewhere in there. Now, I didn't know exactly what was going on at the time, but I remember the day. It was, we'll never forget it, actually. But the auroras were visible in central Florida. And research I did here lately showed that, the transformers actually burn out in Canada. They didn't have, around about the line of the United States there. But that just kind of gives you an idea how far you'll have to see them before you'll see real problems. I agree that the Carrington event may very well have been a small event in the history of things. This may have played a bigger role than we thought.
Yeah, and I had a question for Dr. Kongpop too concerning this. I mean, if we look at the star as a capacitor, and it changes in voltage and it has to have a release at some point, I mean, if the change in voltage is coming from, say, a galactic input current or a region of space we pass through that has a change in voltage, I mean, would this cause a disruption in the star triggering an electrical fracture large enough to, sustain a large flare? I mean, the potential difference would have to, equalize it at some point.
So from this perception, I can help answer that, and according to my understanding and how I model this thing, I see that as the way a star interacts among other stars, and also how the star transfer energy to planets. There are many different ways, and sorry, do you want to know about the interaction between star or between planets?
Yeah. Well, my basic question was: is it possible for our star, if it is acting as a capacitor, to discharge a very large flare if there's a potential difference in the galactic input current?
Okay, so I think I would like to refer to the 5 minutes filter video. I know you seen that before. So the way I understand star is that is where it's a focus point of energy where all the plasma fills to a spherical ball. Of course, it has to be through some kind of reinforcement. Forms a cavity, and the way the activity the star works is that, of course, it relies on energy inputs from external environments, one through those Birkeland currents and double layers that through the polar region. The second factor is something associated with the plasma density around the star during that time. So that's dependent on where the star is traveling around the Milky Way, where if there's a high concentration of plasma. So there's two factors come into play, and one is if the plasma concentration is different, if it's high plasma concentration, the star tends to become more active, and that means we have more flares, solar flares, and things like that. And when the plasma concentration is less, then we have really calm star. And of course, that's one of the factors. So if we want to know when we have big solar flares, so there's one is that the star will, since it has its own vibration frequency, if that frequency is changed, if it's a sudden change, then we'll see quite big eruptions. Or also, if it change over very large band, let's say delta F is very large compared to the fundamental frequency, then we can have expansion and contraction, just like the way brown dwarf star works. I don't know. There are many factors, and a solar flare to exist, to be really large, some external factor have to come to play. So that's general.
Yeah. But would it be safe to say, or I don't know, I'm just hypothesizing here, but with the solar cycle being 11-year cycle or 22-year cycle, it seems very consistent that we may be passing through a cloud of plasma consistently every 11 years, reaching solar max.
There are more.
Would that be a possibility? Yeah.
Yes. One is tied to the plasma density. There's another factor that I haven't talked about, which is the way that they interact with planets. Like Jupiter, there's inner planets and outer planets. Jupiter, it has a conjunction. So, it's aligned with Saturn, like every I think it's every 10 years or something. And the Jupiter itself, its orbits around the sun takes like 12 years. Is that correct? I don't have the right number in my head. So there's some kind of averaging between the planet's orbital period and how planets are aligned. And I've done some research that it ties to the inner planets as well in terms of short-term interaction.
Yeah, there's no doubt in my mind or anybody else's here, I'm sure, that the planets are definitely modulating the star's activity. But as far as like the intensity of the cycles go, could it be that intensity is being determined by the interaction of the solar system through this plasma?
Yes, it's well, if you want to find out where and when this thing will happen, of course, the external factor would be how much energy that flow into our solar system. So that we can gauge that from plasma densities around the sun. So that's when the sun becomes more active during solar maximum.
Would that be based on the galactic current or the galactic wind, so to speak, from our galaxy?
Wind, and the other is just pure alignment. That's from my observation. The alignment right now we know that our solar system is circulate around the Milky Way, and if we look at how the solar activity works, it is actually highly correlate with the way Mercury aligns with the galactic center. So we form like a periodic sunspot cycles, like short-term periodic cycles, like every few weeks. There's a min and max. That's one. And of course, there's a long-term cycle that couple together. So you have to combine all the factors together. That's when you can predict when the next big solar affairs will occur.
Are you working on a book on this or a paper?
Yeah, I'm working on a paper on this. I've done some coding, programming, and be able to predict sunspot number. So we know when the sunspot is going to form, when it's going to disappear. We can forecast that in advance. In months, days in advance, or years.
Yeah.
So, but we have to understand the sun different from the standard model in order to understand this connection.
Sure.
So, if I have a chance, I'll probably talk more at a conference, maybe the next conference, about this. So,
yeah, I have this feeling that there is a reduction in the input current to our solar system that's taking place and causing the heliosphere to shrink, and that's why we're seeing turbulent changes on the outermost planets taking place first.
Yes. So, yes, we see weakening of the polar magnetic field of the sun, right? Same thing for weakening magnetic field of the Earth. We see shrinking atmosphere, right, at Earth. We see the change in Pluto pressure, right, atmospheric pressure.
Right.
So, we're in a state of a big change, or actually some kind of a transition. And of course, if we study history, we know that Earth's going through this type of cycles, every 13,000 years, something like that. That's like one of the long cycles that we currently observe right now.
Yeah. Yes, it should be interesting times ahead.
Yep.
The sunspot takes up about a third of its surface. You're probably familiar. You guys are probably familiar with it, but I'm going to post it if I can find it. And then
That's great.
And then I'm going to sign off. All right. Bye now.
Cool. Does anybody else have any questions or anything before we finish up the call?
No, I'd like to ask Doc something regarding the planetary alignments.
Sure. Yes. That's my expertise.
Thank you, Doc. And my question is there's history that shows that there are other celestial bodies as well that tribal groups have worshipped or identified. For instance, the Dogon and Sirius B connection. Do you see that not only the planetary alignment, but the celestial alignments of even very distant bodies could have a harmonic connection to those peoples or to the Earth?
Yes. What I noticed, I've been looking in short-term connections and try to verify this, and the Milky Way has the highest influence on the solar activities as the planets circulate around the sun. I think the level of influence on our planet and our sun is highly dependent on how those stars kind of along the orbital path of our system or not. So if it's along the orbital path and actually have some kind of a transit without planets and things like that, it do have some effects. However, I don't see a lot of influence if those stars or galaxies are, if they are located off from the orbital path, or in the north and south pole direction of the sun, unless something to do with how the pole axis and all kind of things are determined for each planet, and how it's aligned with other star systems. But in terms of solar activities and Earth changing events, it has to somehow in the orbital path, or along the orbital plane, just like the way the ancient people, they how they define all the constellations, 12 constellations. So those kind of things.
And do you suspect that the galactic connection and interconnection in our own galaxy, that galaxies in general have that similar connection interface as well on a different scale?
I believe so. The galaxy may behave differently from our star system because they're not as synchronized as our star, because we can see that how our star system is mainly spherical, it's all spherical objects, and they're circling around the central, point, and it's highly organized system. Unlike the Milky Way, if you look at it, it's it has spiral arms, and the way the clouds of stars kind of scatter out in a more open than just along the orbital plane at center, at the black hole, whatever you want to call it. So they are less organized, so the structure is less organized, so it's pretty much we can use like plasma model, the way we model the galaxy, so it's less complex in that way, in that sense. So the way it interacts between galaxies, I have not studied that much, but it'll be an interesting topic to study.
Excellent response, Doctor. Good to be with you today.
Yeah.
Hey, if anybody wants an interesting of a star, you might want to check out that image I sent. It's a JPEG file. Y'all see it right there? Yeah. Kongpop might find that interesting. It's a star that has roughly a third of its photospheres disappear. You've seen it, right?
Yeah, that gets me.
Oh wow, yeah.
Gets me to thinking about black hole sun. Magical star turned into a sunspot.
Yeah, that's
Well, if its photosphere disappears, would we see it? No.
No,
But it'd have a gravitational field and an electric field. But
we call it a black hole.
I guess we would, wouldn't we?
Would it have to just disappear, or would it appear? What if it appeared in a different spectrum? Would it disappear?
What if it was just so powerful light could not escape it?
well. There's a theory behind this that Don Scott talked about with the large sunspot possibility, the whole photosphere dropping out completely, or it does become a dark star and then possibly reignites it. Wall, I want to ask Wall.
Yeah, it seems like we can explain that if we assume that all the plasma interaction has something to do with the external environment.
Yeah.
So if the plasma was, if there's some kind of absence in plasma, or there'll be less plasma during the time of this, this could be some large eruptions or some kind of strong magnetic field or something that it looks like during the time in solar minimum we have large coronal holes. That's what I see.